What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I am so super stoked and excited to have you here again. If this is your first time here, I just want to give you a hint. Go watch my last video because at the end there's some information you might want to know about that the other members of this community, and yes, we are a community. I'm not going to call you subscribers. I'm going to call you members of the community because we are in this together. But those in the community probably already know what I'm talking about. And if you know, you know. And if you know, I ask that you stick around to the end of this video also because I do have some updates I want to give you on that. But before we get into that, let's go ahead and start talking about color correction. Now, I know I did a video on color grading where I said just drop the LUT onto and things like that. And we kind of touched on color correction a little bit in that. But I really wanted to dive in deep because I've been answering a lot of questions from people about this. And it turns out what a lot of the disconnect I'm noticing among the communities I'm in between color correcting and how to really get that look down pat is everyone is trying to do the art without knowing the science. You see, color correction is as much art as it is science. So I wanted to do this video real quick and I want to teach you guys all of it. I can't teach you the art. The art is on you. That you have your eye, you're going to create the look you want to create, but I can teach you some of the science that might make it a little bit easier to find that look. So this video is going to be a little bit different because we're going to not just be working inside of LumaFusion. LumaFusion is a great tool, but if you've been doing this for a minute, you probably have already figured out that with everything that LumaFusion has that makes it shine, there are some workarounds we have to do, mostly limitations based on two factors. One, Apple and what you're capable of doing inside an iPhone or an iPad, and two, their desire to create the best possible product while still allowing it to be touchscreen. So there's a lot of stuff, as far as I understand, they can do, but then everyone will be required to buy a keyboard and use shortcuts. So to keep it as a touchscreen, there's a lot of workarounds we have to do. And I'm okay with that. And color grading is one of those, or color correction and color grading is one of those factors in that there are things we don't have access to in LumaFusion yet. Now, some of them are coming, like the scopes I'm about to show you are actually coming very shortly. But those are a great tool, and they're going to help you to get that science down perfectly. So let's jump into Final Cut and LumaFusion. Let's just go over some of the differences so you know what it is you're looking at. All right, so here's a screen you're probably used to. Yeah, I expanded it out a little bit, but this is your basic beginning part of a LumaFusion project. As you can see, I have footage here that I recorded on my iPhone. I did two versions. I did the regular, or I did through Filmic Pro, and then I did one on the native camera app. Do you see the difference? Filmic Pro is actually, I shot it in a log profile. Let's get right back to where we want it to be. And the iPhone footage is on the native camera. And now if we switch this over to Final Cut, you're going to see they look pretty similar. Like you have the same basic structures here. I do have my source window closed out. You can do that in Final Cut. I like that for this phase because then I can keep my monitor up bigger. And I have the exact same footage on here that I have on the other one. I even have it at the exact same spot. Now, I want you to look at this and I want you to see the difference here. This is going to be one of your primary differences between Final Cut and LumaFusion, or one of not one of the primary differences, but one of those things that you're going to be able to notice. Do you see how the image looks different in each one? I can bring this down. It's not the being up higher or being bigger or smaller, but look at the red of this car and how much more defined and how much more that red pops out in Final Cut. This is because Final Cut is actually doing some of the processing automatically. It's a much more powerful engine much more powerful processor. So it is, or much more powerful software. So there are things that are going to already be taken care of as soon as you open your footage. But that's okay. It's not a bad thing that LumaFusion has this slightly more muted color to begin with. This is, LumaFusion is actually designed around Filmic Pro. And so when you import the footage into Filmic Pro, it's actually, they work together really closely. So this is actually more closely to what the actual app is wanting to bring off of the sensor. And this brings me to what I wanted to talk about first before we get into the color correction, which is exactly how your phone records the footage. Right here are the 3 lenses, right? Behind each of these lenses is a sensor. It's a small chip with a bunch of little basically diodes that are collecting information. All of the light that's coming through the lens is then like spread out among that sensor, which picks up all the light information, all of the color, the shadow, the brightness, all of that, and it turns that into an actual image. So that's what color is, and that's what color is, period, to your eyes, to everything. We don't actually see color. I don't know if you know that or not. Most people, well, not most people, those of us that can see in color, like there are some that are colorblind and don't see any color at all. But those of us that see color don't see color. We just, as the light is reflected back off of a surface, the wavelength of different beams of light, faster or slower, and the way that our brain comprehends that turns that into color. And that's exactly what happens inside of your phone, or if you're using a camera, inside of your camera. And that creates the color image. So really, all we're going to be manipulating when we adjust the color is the light. It's the amount of light, it's the wavelength of the light, it's all of those things together that we're actually working on when we go into our software and we update or edit our color and correct it and get it back to what we consider to be vibrant, contrasting colors. This measurement we use is called a nit, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. I would tell you where nit comes from, but I don't know. I haven't really had anyone talk to me about it who knows. So I didn't go to school for this. I learned this as I went, and none of the people who taught me knew what a nit was or really thought it was worth talking about. So you don't need to know what a nit is, other than it's the unit of measurement that we use for light, and that light is, or all color is light. Like I said before, there are 3 primary colors. That's red, green, and blue. And those are the ones that we're going to be working in, and that's what we manipulate to create color. Let's jump in and let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so for this, we're going to be in Final Cut for a second, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring up what are known as video scopes. Let me actually put our vector scope at the top, and our waveform at the bottom. Okay, so here are your 3 best scopes to use. These are what I use every time I'm color grading or color correcting. And this right here is what's known as a vector scope, and around it, this is a color wheel. It's really important that you understand the color wheel, that you keep that in mind, because looking at color on a wheel makes it so much easier to understand the different manipulations and things you can do with that color and in that video. For one, if you look here, or for one thing, it's the weirdest thing, because you would assume, well, first of all, let's talk about the fact that here are your 3 primary colors, red, green, and blue, and in between those are your magentas, your teals, and your oranges. And really what's or cyan, magenta, yellow, green, blue, they're all marked off with different things here. But what is really interesting is when you're trying to create color, you want colors that are opposite one another on the color wheel actually complement each other. And it's because of what's going on right here, which is our red, green, and blue parade. So if you pull up the red and you pull up the blue, you see they're almost opposite one another if you match those two out, you're going to get a much better look than if you were to match blue and green. I hope that makes sense. The closer they are together, it's kind of like when you're putting your clothes on. You don't want to necessarily get two different shades of blue. You want a shade of blue and something on the opposite end, and they match each other better. That's what you're looking at here in your vectorscope, or when your color wheel. Now on the vectorscope, you see right here you have this line. This line is actually your skin tone indicator. This is one of the most interesting facts there is about color correcting and color grading, is it doesn't matter your nationality, your skin tone, any of that doesn't go into play. Your skin tones are going to be along that line. They won't be any further one way or the other. They're going to literally just be along that line, because we all have the exact same color of skin, because all of our skin is actually transparent. It's the blood and the melanin in there that give us a color to our skin. So if we all have the same base color of skin, then all we have to worry about is the darkness of that base color, right? And so if you're talking about darkness when looking at a color wheel, then what you're really talking about is everything in the center here. Like if all of your color was right here into the center, it would be white, stark, colorless white. As you move out, it goes darker in whatever shade of the circle you're going in. It would just get darker and darker and darker. And then as you see just outside of that, this really does a great job of indicating that it's black. Get past that and it's just pure black on the outside. So all of your skin tones are going to be along this line, and just as you move along is going to determine the melanin level, I guess would be the best way of saying it. Down here, you have your two waveforms. These are basically the exact same thing looking from two different angles. So this is all of your light in here, and everywhere here where it's perfectly white, this is all where all three of these colors are blended perfectly together. And here you see it's green, you're having more green, you have more red right here, you have some blue in here. So where they're separated is where you have different colors, and that's over that you can see represented in here. As you see on the right side, the blue is a lot bigger, and the red seems to not come as low. First off, let me tell you, these numbers here, the 120 to -20, these are your nit levels. You never want anything to be over 100. If it goes over 100, that's going to be like right here where it's completely blown out and there's no information available. It's just too much for the processor to handle. And then down here is where it's going to be below 0, and that's just solid black, and again, no information for the processor to handle. Which brings me to the next thing I want to talk about that really affects how high quality your color output is going to be, and that is, remember I told you about the sensor. Those sensors, the size of them really does matter. They're measured in what are known as megapixels. I'm not going to go into really like a lot of detail on what a megapixel is, but just know that a pixel is just a little dot of color, and a megapixel is about 1,000 of those. So if you have a sensor that is 12 megapixels, it's 12,000 little pixels. But if you have a 24 megapixel, that's 24,000. See, this is why cell phone cameras used to not be really considered like good quality images, because their sensors were so small. It's only been in the past few years that the companies have really started to innovate and put larger sensors in that are taking in more data, and this is why we're able to have these really crisp and clear images like we see in this video coming from a smartphone, from a tiny little lens. On the note of pixels, the next thing we need to talk about when talking about what our phones or our cameras do to help us get better quality images to work with is we need to talk about the amount of pixels that we release. This is what's known as the 1080p or 4K resolutions. What this actually means is it's talking about the number of pixels available on the screen that the image is able to put together so that it doesn't have to fill in gaps and you can get more of the really great detail. So if you're going from like a yellow to an orange, in the middle there, if you don't have enough pixels, then your camera's processor is going to kind of move those around and create a color that it thinks would be the color that would be in the middle. It's not going to be the actual color that's in the middle. I hope that makes sense. I'm going really fast. I know it's just a lot of stuff to cover, and I don't want this to be a 2-hour-long video. So along with the resolution, the next process that we have to worry about is the process. Like, it's the processing of the video, known as the compression. Your compression is going to really inhibit or help what it is you're able to do in the color correcting process. This is why so many filmmakers are really hyped and excited about the iPhone 13 being able to output in ProRes. No matter what, you cannot get just the raw data off the sensor and have it be an image that's really playable or you're able to be manipulated, because it's just so much data and information. So what happens is, no matter what camera you use, or whether it be your phone or your expensive camera, it's going to compress it down into a usable file. Prior to a few years ago, the only two real big players on the market were with an H.265 or H.264. Just know those as an MP4, which is what you standard are probably used to, and an MOV file. Now, ironically, Apple iPhones did not actually recognize MOV files because they were too big until Apple got better processors in their iPhones and iPads. They didn't allow anyone to use MOV, even though it was their own creation. And up until now, they didn't allow anybody to use their best creation, which is a standard on the market, which is the Apple ProRes. Apple ProRes is the least compression done to any video. Now, why is that important? Well, the more compression you're doing, the more data you're losing. And the more data you lose, the less you have to play around with and manipulate inside your editing software. I hope that makes sense. What we're working with today is MOV, but yeah, I'm excited, just like everybody else, about the iPhone 13 being able to produce ProRes, because that's going to really change the game we have as far as like color correcting iPhone footage. Okay, so back to our scopes. So now that you know how it works, now we need to know what we have to do to manipulate this footage. So like I said, the Final Cut does a little bit more processing to it than LumaFusion does, because this is what you see with LumaFusion. Like I said, it's more muted. This is more intended on what you should be seeing. Final Cut doesn't know 100% the LumaFusion parameters, so it kind of has to fill in some of the gaps itself. And so that's what we start off with here. Now let's look at the tools we have in order to do color correction. This is what you're used to seeing. This is an original palette. These are all the dials and sliders you're used to seeing. This is that exact same setup inside of Final Cut. It's just a little bit more refined, and you have a little bit more control. Let me see. I want to get my scopes actually bigger, because what we do to the image, you can actually see, you can read all of that here. You don't necessarily have to look at it like you do inside of LumaFusion. But let's look at what we have here. First off, we have these color wheels that are labeled global, shadows, highlights, and midtones. So where is that on LumaFusion? Right here. This is your top slider. Like I've said 1,000 times, I don't mess with brightness and contrast that much in here, because it's just an overall extra saturation of the actual image, and anything you want to do in there. Oops. you can actually do up here. So you see, you bring that all the way up, and see how that like just overexposes. This is actually more of an exposure than it is a highlight. This is your highlight. You see how it just makes the brights brighter, and the same thing here with your shadows. It just makes the darks a little bit darker. This is the same thing you're doing here. You have your global, which is your overall. You see what it's doing here with your, see what it's doing down here? Look over at these, at what's happening. As you adjust your brightness, everything is like coming up and it's reaching that 100 mark. And then it's doing what's known as clipping. It's just stopping. It won't show anything above this level. And it just puts it as pure, unusable white light. The shadows, if you bring your shadows down, you see it's doing the exact same thing. You bring your shadows up, it kind of pulls some of that detail out of the shadows. It just makes the shadows a little bit brighter. Your highlights, this is more of what that top or that far right slider does. This global would be, that's literally the exact same thing that the brightness does in LumaFusion. And this is what that far right slider would be. And this is that far left slider. Does the exact same thing, but I'm showing you this. I want you guys to see what it's actually doing to the image, to the color. It's just making those pop out so much more. And your midtones, that's going to be this one right here. That's going to be really adjusting those mid-range colors the same as this is adjusting here. You see how, if you look at the image, it's doing the exact same thing here that middle slider does in LumaFusion. But look here at what it's doing to your colors and to your light. It's literally taking this middle area and bringing it up or down. Now, if we were to take and we were going to pull some of our, we can't really pull a lot out of our shadows here because this is a very bright picture. We are going to have a little bit of bright white. You're going to have it up here and on this van and in these. And you're going to have some dark shadows. So it's okay if you spread those out a little bit. You don't necessarily want to focus only on here, but you want to look at this also. And make sure that the bulk of it is staying in the middle. And now let's take a look at our image. And you'll see how I'm saying what I'm doing is actually helping. It looks weird on the scope, but it's actually making the image a little better. And then our midtones are kind of going to pull some of that shadow back out or put it back in. However we want to do it. We're just trying to pull this brightest part. We don't want this brightest part, everything to be way up here because then it's all blown out. And we don't want everything to be down here because it's too dark. So you want to find that mid-range. Just like on LumaFusion, you're going to use softer touches. You're going to do the same thing here. So we've got this a little more spread out. Now let's go do that same thing with those sliders in LumaFusion. So we're going to pull our highlights up, our shadows down, and then we're just going to tweak our midtones a little bit. Now in LumaFusion, you don't have as much play in certain things, but you have better play in others. So now these images look pretty close together, or pretty close to the same thing. Yeah, so we have a pretty safe image here. We're not as far apart as we were even initially. Okay, so we have a pretty good picture here. Now what we want to talk about is the color temperature. Okay, so what is color temperature? Well, color temperature is, remember I said the three primary colors are red, blue, and green. Well, your color temperature really determines whether you tilt that color towards the green or towards the red or tilt it towards the blue. So what ends up happening is as you increase the amount of blue, it decreases the red and the green. And as you increase the red, it increases the red and green and decreases the blue. So why is that important? Well, think about a day. Think about what you imagine a summer day looking like. It's a bright red sky, a bright red sun, and It's blue skies, it's crisp greens, it's things like that. And that's going to make you think warm weather. Whereas if you think of blue, less green, less red in there, everything's kind of like flush, that's going to make you think winter and colder. So that's how your brain works. So that's why we call it color temperature. It's really just red and blue. So on here in Final Cut, we have this slider that really controls the color temperature. And I want you to watch right here what happens when I shift this one way or the other. You see as the blue goes higher, what happens to the red and green? And as the red and green go higher, what happens to the blue? That's really what happens when you're doing color temperature changes. So, but we don't have this slider inside LumaFusion. So how do we control color temperature? Well, the secret is actually right in front of you right here. And I want you to look at this color wheel and then compare it to what we do have in LumaFusion. Maybe these guys right here, right? You see how this could be your color wheel right here if you connect that to there, that to there. Or sorry. You see how this is the opposite ends of the color wheel. So you have the blue and the yellow. Blue and yellow. You have the cyan and magenta, or green and magenta. Green and magenta. And you have red and cyan. Red and cyan. So it's the different angles here are represented here. This is why I have on my footage here what are known as adjustment layers. Now, an adjustment layer is exactly what it sounds like. It's something I wish we could get in LumaFusion, and I've been begging for it, and hopefully one day it'll happen. But again, it really just depends on the capabilities of iOS and of the touchscreen. But an adjustment layer is a layer you can put onto your footage that allows you to make the adjustments you need to make. So let's test that theory. And we're going to go one adjustment layer at a time. Let's start with the first one, and we're going to start with the top, which is going to be going between the red and the cyan. So I'm just going to look at my scopes here, and then we'll check it against the image. And we don't want to pull massively far. And of course, we could always like over or under saturate, but we're just going to leave this alone right there. Now we go to our next adjustment layer, which will be the green and magenta. And I'm doing it only on the global, by the way. I'm doing it because the global is overall every bit of the image. And then our final adjustment layer is the blue and yellow. All right, let's take a look at our image and see what we did here. That looks pretty good. Now let's see if we can copy this inside of LumaFusion. I would say that's a pretty good likeness. What do you think? Think we hit it? I think we hit it. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully understanding the science, because, you know, color correcting in LumaFusion is not an easy thing to do. We have to do it by sight. We don't have the scopes yet. Though, like I said, that is coming any day now as a paid add-on. But until then, you have to do it by sight, and that's not an easy task, even if you know what each of those sliders is doing. but it's even much harder if you don't. So hopefully learning that and learning the science of what you're actually doing when you move those sliders is helping, or did help you, and I'm hoping that your color correcting and color grading is just gonna blow up like mine did when I learned this stuff. So like I promised, I have an update to the contest I talked about in my last video. Or not contest, the giveaway, really. Like, I'm giving it away. You don't have to do anything except be a subscriber. I am extending the deadline on that because I realized after I posted saying, hey, you should already, here's this thing I'm going to give away, and only to people who are already, no, it wasn't fair, and it wasn't just, and I want to be fair and just in everything. So I'm going to give everyone who watched this video also a chance to come in and become a subscriber and have a chance to win this light setup. If you want to see it, remember I said I was going to post a picture. If you watched my shorts, you saw it. If you didn't, I might be nice and put a picture up. It might be with this video. If it is, it's going to go now. Okay, if you would like to help, guys, and if you'd like to just help this community grow, help me to put out different videos, more videos, to do more things, there are a few ways that you can help. Prayer, of course, is always welcome. If you are financially able and you are in need of any of the items that I use, if you need a new microphone, which I'm going to talk about in another video soon, if you need a light and you don't want to wait for the giveaway, because you know, what's 2 lights compared to 1? Double the fun. Or anything like that, just click on any of the links below for my gear. And all of those are Amazon affiliate links. And I may or may not get a commission for it, depending on so many different factors. But there's also a link down there for a buy me a coffee, where you can just buy me coffee. Like, for the price of a cup of coffee, you can help donate to this channel and help me reach more people. Hopefully, one of you who is watching this right now, well, guaranteed, if you're a subscriber, one of you that is watching right now will most likely be the winner. And you will get this amazing light set, and I get to bless you. Hopefully, you come back and we just grow this community and become a just big family. And yeah, I'm just going to keep rambling if you let me. So on that, until the next time, stay safe, stay healthy, keep editing, and God bless. Have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.